Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Man, did you guys have a chance to watch the Toyota Series Championship on Grand Lake of the Cherokees over the weekend? What a phenomenal tournament. They had live coverage on day 3. Days 1 and 2 were just the weigh-in, but you were able to see how the tournament went down, and man, it was one of the best that I've seen in a long time. That's the cool thing about tournaments is you never know what kind of tournament it's going to be, and they just keep getting more exciting. When you think you've seen them all, well, voila, a new one shows up. But there's a few cool things that happen in this tournament. This is, I think, the last tournament where the full field for the full tournament was able to use live scope, forward-facing sonar, and the 360. You know, Major League Fishing has made rule changes for 2026. In the BFLs, there's going to be 3 hours of forward-facing sonar. The rest of the tournament, nada. Toyota, similar deal. Pro Circuit, similar deal. But they've limited the forward-facing sonar technology in 2026. So this being the end of 2025, the Toyota Championship, guys had full range of forward-facing sonar. And oddly enough, forward-facing sonar did not win the tournament. You had some of the best forward-facing sonar fishermen in the world fishing this tournament. As I'm looking at the top 10, that was definitely a dominant pattern. But the winner, Roger Fitzpatrick, was fishing old school. He won the tournament via a tie. There's a lot of cool things. I'll break some of this stuff down, but Roger Fitzpatrick was throwing basically a 1-ounce jig and a big 1-ounce spinnerbait. I think most of his fish catches came on that big Omega spinnerbait. He did back it up with like a 1-ounce Omega jig. But he tied with Drew Gill. Drew Gill was forward-facing sonar, using the forward-facing sonar out off the docks, out in the middle of these cuts and these drains, throwing kind of some non-traditional stuff, I guess. I see most of his fish catches, I believe, were on some sort of a dice, you know, the little fuzzy cube. Maybe he did mix in a minnow and a Nico and stuff, because he makes one of the, you know, Big Bite Baits has one of the best little Nico worms, and that's Drew Gill's Nico Rama. So I'm sure he threw that into the mix, but he was plinking off a lot of these fish that were late to the docks, looking at them and sniping them. He's one of the best in the country. And I'm looking at Tucker Smith, 3rd place. You know, he was out there throwing you know, a jig head minnow, I believe, and some dice. It's kind of like a dice jig head minnow deal, out deep off the bank. Riley Harris, 4th place, throwing an A-rig, looking at him. But Fitzpatrick was still able to end up winning the tournament and competing using a spinnerbait. It was Grand Lake. Anytime you're on these Ozark fisheries, they have a lot of docks, and there's a lot of fish that live around these docks. But I've had Fitzpatrick on the live stream, and actually he's going to be on the live stream Tuesday to break down how he won this tournament. And
one of those tournaments Dennis is talking about, I can't remember which one it was, they were on top water pretty good in October, but they didn't bite it until late in the day. And we were running by a spot, a history spot, where we'd caught them before in the past. I'm driving the boat. Dennis says, "What about that right there?" I said, "Practiced it, never got a bite." And I went, "Wait a minute. I practiced it in the morning." So we spun around there, and I forget which one of us, but we caught a 7-pound something right there, and it helped us win that championship that weekend in a spot right there that, because he said something, I was going to go buy it because I'd already been there and practiced it and never had anything. But it was just one of those spots that they live.
we've had Drew Gill on here.
Ultimately, I think it starts at bank fishing. You know, when you're trying to get into it, I remember I'd spend about 2 days a week. I had an almost 2-mile loop in town of all the public water bodies that we could fish. And I had a backpack, and I had 2 PVC tubes put in the side of the backpack to where I could put rods in them, and I had bungee cords that I wrap around them to where I could walk with my rods in my backpack, and I would march that loop twice a week. And if I caught 5 or 6 bass, it was an incredible day. They were probably all going to be under 2 pounds, but you know, that was where it started for me. And it can start right there. You know, I had a backpack, 2 tackle trays in the bag, and 2 rods. that probably MSRP were $40, $50 combos.
Both really great guys. I was pulling for both of them, to be quite honest. I like both of them. They're both really good guys. But you know, Roger's been doing this for a long time. I think this is, I want to say this is like his 270th Major League Fishing tournament that he's fished. I may be off a little bit, something like that. I believe this was his 13th MLF win, and he's in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. So he's competing against a lot of these 20-year-old anglers. And by winning the Toyota Championship, Roger qualified for the 2026 Redcrest, which happens to be on Table Rock Lake, a lake that Roger has done very good on in the past, and he's going to be heavily favored to top 10 this tournament. So there's a little bit of an underdog angle to this. I mean, certainly people that know Roger know he's not necessarily an underdog when it comes to Lake of the Ozarks, Grand Lake, Table Rock, that kind of stuff, because he's got a lot of history. But he was up against the best, you know, cheater box fishermen in the country, and he prevailed ultimately, which is, it was really cool to see, and it was dramatic. He had, you know, he missed some fish. Watching the live on day 3, I saw one fish that he missed behind the dock. His co-angler almost had it in the net. It was on the backside of a dock cable, and it kind of swung the wrong way right at the last second, and it was a good fish. It looked to be like in that 3.5 to 4 pound range, and man, what a loss. But like a true veteran, he didn't even say a whole lot about it. He just kind of checked his line and started casting, just shook it off. I mean, you know it's in the back of his head, but he's done this enough to know it's not going to do you any good to dwell on it. You got to keep casting. You got to keep looking for that next fish. And he was fishing hard. You know, he was fishing the stuff that most people would go past, like pulling in and fishing behind the docks, making real intricate pitches with his spinnerbait and his jig. And those fish don't see near as much pressure as those fish that sit out in the fronts or the sides of the docks. There was some guys that were catching them on a spinnerbait off the fronts and sides of the docks too, but I think he was just breaking that stuff down a little bit better than everybody else. And you know, that big 1 ounce spinnerbait with, I believe, like a size 7 blade on it is just mimicking the big gizzard shad. But it was so close that it was a tie. Roger Fitzpatrick had 41 pounds 1 ounce. Drew Gill had 41 pounds 1 ounce. And this is kind of weird. You know, the tiebreaker goes to, in the Toyota Series, the way I understood it was the biggest bag on day 1. So Roger had 14 pounds 8 ounces on day 1. Drew had 12 pounds 10 ounces on day 1. So it was a tie. Roger got the win based on that day 1. And I don't know how they can do that different. I mean, you know, I always think it'd be cool that if there's a tiebreaker, the guys go back out on the water for 2 hours or 4 hours, probably the next day, because it was already dark. You know, it's that time of year where it gets dark at like 5. So that wouldn't have been an option to go back out that day, but maybe the next day. But then you got all the staff that would have to stay over, and there's a lot more a lot more money involved in that. People want to get back home to their families and stuff. So that is the way it is. You know, it's the day 1 biggest bag. Some tournaments, it's the biggest bag of the prior days. Whoever has the biggest bag of the prior days, if it's a tie, they end up winning for it. But the way I understood it for this tournament is whoever had the biggest bag on day 1 ended up winning. And, you know, I watched Drew. I think Drew thought he had won it because it was so tight that I believe Drew was in 17th or 19th, and he was able to come back and almost win this tournament. That's how tight the weights were. I'm looking at 6th place was 40 pounds 1 ounce. 1st place was 41 pounds 1 ounce. So 1 pound difference between 1st and 6th place. That's how tight it was. And it was the same way going into day 3. Virtually anybody in the top 25, you know, could have won that tournament. There are some really big bags swimming around in Grand Lake. I mean, there's 22, 23 pound sacks. So nobody was really out of it. And for it to come down to a tie, it was great TV. You know, the drama was intense, and nobody really knew who won. You know, I thought Tucker Smith, he had 40 pounds 15 ounces, so he was right there. All these guys were so close. But I thought the coolest things of this tournament were, you got a veteran that's fished 270 something tournaments, power fishing, keeping a spinnerbait and and a jig in his hand was able to overcome all these phenomenal live scopers. And most of the field in the top 10, that's exactly what they were doing. We had Bank Shaw in there. I mean, Bank Shaw has been, his 25 season will probably never be repeated. I mean, it's, if you go back and look at his stats, it's just, he's just had a phenomenal year, and he made the BPT, and he's going to continue to dominate in that format. Adam Boley, you know, Lake of the Ozarks hammer, he was right there. He had 40 pounds 2 ounces. Really solid fisherman. Of course, Tucker Smith's Bassmaster Elite Series Pro. He's always a threat. He is always a threat. And, you know, as I look down here a little bit further, you got Greg Bohannon. You know, he was sitting in 3rd place going into day 3. He was doing the jig thing, and, you know, his pattern kind of, I guess, fell apart a little bit. You had Shane Long, who is a Grand Lake hammer. Tyler Weberg was leading on day 1 at 18 pounds, and he had some boat issues and stuff, and it kind of fell apart for him. Lee Livesey, you know, Bassmaster Elite Pro as well. He finished in 16th. Justin Lukemeyer was leading after day 2. He just he just needed a kicker fish. But a lot of good Ozarks fishermen were in this, and it was a super exciting tournament. But it's good to see somebody that was fishing old school, a veteran in the sport, and an older guy still be able to compete and win one of the biggest tournaments out there. It just shows you that you can be in a field where a lot of the best at this new technology are out there, and you can still compete. You know, you can still top 10, you can still win. And it all comes down to your mindset, covering water, staying committed, and staying focused. And that's what Roger Fitzpatrick did. So just want to make this little video. Leave in the comment sections, what did you think about the tournament? What stood out to you about it? Because to me, it was just, man, it was one of the best tournaments of the year. There's no doubt about it. It was super exciting. It came down to the wire, and I loved every minute of it. Another really cool thing that happened during the Toyota Championship was on the co-angler side. This is the first time an international angler has won the Toyota Championship, and it was Italian co-angler Giovanni Sosorelli. So unbelievable for somebody that entered the tournament or qualified for the tournament via the international circuit. Thanks to MLF for airing day 3. I know it's expensive. You got cameramen. You just got a lot of monetary expenses when you're doing live coverage. But it was so nice to see that day 3, and I'm super stoked that, you know, 2 of my favorite guys out there finished 1st and 2nd, and we were able to watch it go down. So that's all I got for you. Just wanted to chime in with you. If you haven't watched some of the footage, there's lots of clips out there on YouTube and on MLF. Go check it out, man. It was definitely an exciting tournament. Guys, have a great week. Till next time.